Hello, I'm Deb Brinkman, President of the League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park, I'd like to welcome all of you here tonight, the candidates, the audience, and those viewing on this forum on Civic Channel TV, or Civic TV Channel 17. A reminder that tonight's forum will be rerun on Civic TV Channel 17 until the completion of the general election on November 3rd. Probably till the primary election, right? Yep, August 8th. The League of Women Voters is a tonight's moderator is Jillian Rosenquist. Jillian is a member of the League of Women Voters Golden Valley. Thank you and welcome. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization which promotes political responsibility through informed and active participation in government. The League of Women Voters does not support or oppose political parties or individual candidates. The views in this forum are those of the candidates. Sponsorship of this forum by the League of Women Voters is not an endorsement of any candidate. All viable candidates have been invited here tonight. We encourage our League members as we encourage each of you to become involved in your community and the political party of your choice. We ask that you consider becoming a member of the League of Women Voters St. Louis Park and help us continue to provide the citizens of our community the opportunity to hear candidates discuss issues that are important to you. For more information about membership, please contact us at lwvmn.org and click on the local links, sites, or www.lwvslp.org. And I'll turn it over to Jillian. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello and welcome. I'm Jillian Rosenquist, again, of the League of Women Voters Golden Valley. I'm the moderator for tonight's Candidates Forum for the St. Louis Park Council Ward 1 primary election. There are 4 candidates for City Council Ward 1: Steve Kaplan, Margaret Rogg, Brian Shekleton, and Zaylore Stout. Tonight's candidate questions include written questions from our live audience. Those viewing this forum on Cable TV Channel 17 may submit your questions via email to rdunlap@slp.org. Written questions from the League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park are also included in tonight's forum. We'll be using a timekeeper, so everyone has the same amount of time to respond to the questions. We will begin with candidate opening statements. Statements will be given in alphabetical order by ward and are limited, to 1.5 minutes each. Next, the candidates will respond to questions. We will be alternating candidates, so different candidates will respond first to a question. Each candidate will have a maximum of 1.5 minutes to respond. Thank you, and we will now move to our opening statements, starting with Mr. Kaplan.
How much time?
Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes for the opening statement. I'm sorry, is it 2? Well, I'm sorry, I'm just reading the paper that I got. Is that correct? Okay, then it will be 2 minutes. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm Steve Kaplan. Thank you. You can't really go wrong. If you want diversity, you can't ask for a better smorgasbord. You've got a woman, you've got a person of color, a lawyer from Southern California, you've got a lifetime public servant, politician, or you've got an angry old white guy or nice Jewish boy, however you want to look at it. That's the bottom line. There's nothing more to say except that I want to talk on one subject really quickly, and that is housing. I want to bring up housing because I was thinking about it since the last time we got together last month at Lenox. And here's what I figured out, that one of the biggest issues with St. Louis Park with the housing is the high rises and multiple dwellings, skyscrapers, or taller units, as it were. I don't think it's any problem on Wayzata Boulevard on the frontage road with home suites next to Olive Garden on, facing 394 in a business area. That's all well and good. That's not imposing on anybody. when those same developers want to put a high-rise on Excelsior Boulevard, you've got neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood, residence after residence after residence. You've got people living there, and that's wrong. That's a problem. That's a major problem with the city council that the city council needs to address. And the city council, every time they see a developer coming, I think they see and they smell dollar signs. And I think the problem is that the city council needs to put the residences and the neighborhoods and the people first and the developers second. Let me repeat that. They need to put the developers behind the line and put the people that have been living there and supporting the city and working with the city and just surviving there first. Put the people first, put the developers second. That's probably one of the biggest issues that I can think of, and I think that's where the city council needs to be responsible and listen to the people. Put the people first, put the developer second. Otherwise, you'll end up like up.
Mr. Kaplan, your time is done. Thank you. And just going forward, we will let candidates finish a sentence when time is called, and then you must end. Thank you. Margaret Rogue?
Thanks, Jillian. Thanks to the League, and thanks to my fellow candidates for being here tonight. And thank you to all the audience members, both here and at home, for caring about local politics and being engaged. 6 months ago, if you would have asked me if I'd be running for city council, I would have said that's not really in my plans. But then Sue Sanger retired, kind of to my surprise, and people around me started saying, you should think about running. And so I did think about it, and before too long it struck me that over the last 25 years, without intending to, without realizing it, I've been preparing pretty well for a role on the city council. My husband Ben and I moved to St. Louis Park in 1992, and since then I've found a lot of ways to be involved on a deep level in our community, starting with a neighborhood, my own neighborhood, and then moving to the schools and some leadership levels. I've then gotten the chance to be involved with many of our great community nonprofits for a stint as director of St. Louis Park Friends of the Arts. I also helped craft a grant that started Health in the Park here in St. Louis Park. I have to look down because I always forget what I've done. For the last 10 plus years, I've been an election judge. I've also been an asset champion. And currently, I'm a commissioner on the St. Louis Park Human Rights Commission. I'm also co-chair of my neighborhood association. There's actually quite a bit more, and you can find it on my website, rogforslp.com. So I don't think that 25 years of involvement should be a prerequisite for any would-be city council candidate. But I do think that it's a pretty nice perk that I would bring to this role. And I'm excited and proud to be able to consider bringing that knowledge and experience that I've gained in our great community to the next level of leadership in St. Louis Park.
Thank you, Ms. Rogg. Next, Mr. Shekleton. Shekleton. I'm really...
I'd like to say I'm related to him anyways. I'm Brian Shekleton. It's nice to see a room full of people here tonight. I think we've all had different campaign events where we thought, wish there were more people. And it's nice to see everybody here tonight. St. Louis Park is known for being an innovative, forward-thinking community. Think of community policing. We started doing that 20 years ago, before it was expanded across the state, before it became a national model. And Children's First. That's not just a slogan here. That's actually how the school district, and the city partner with nonprofits and the private sector to build a community around children. I bought my grandparents' house, and I bought it not just because I have nice memories in that structure, but because this is actually a place where I'd like to help raise my children at some point in the future. Public service has been my life. That's been my life. Right out of graduate school, I worked with the Children's Defense Fund. I've worked 3 different times for Hennepin County Commissioner Peter McLaughlin over the last 20 years. I was hired by one of the speakers of the Minnesota House of Representatives to lead some of the finance committees at the State House. The last 10 years, I've served on the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board, which is this $14 million unit of local government that levies a tax on all of us in the room. We manage water quality from Minneapolis through the western suburbs into Carver County. And, it's the experience, my my experience, my knowledge, my network, I think I would be valuable assets in this community, because together, nobody has any right answer, but together we can figure out how to make streets safer. We can figure out how to manage the development pressures that are clearly coming into this community. And as housing prices are spiking, we need to figure out how to respond in a way to keep this a community where people can age in place, as well as raise their families. I hope to earn your vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shekleton. Next, Zaylore Stout.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event and for all the work that the League of Women Voters does. I was present at the City Council meeting when the League of Women Voters presented their information in regards to ranked choice voting, and I know that the work and the research that you did in regard to that was really valued by City Council. I was also present when the League of Women Voters was at the naturalization ceremony that happened for the first time here in St. Louis Park, where we had new citizens taking their oath, and the League of Women Voters was there to make sure that they had the opportunity to register to vote, which is really crucial and important. I want to thank all you attendees and those that are watching as well at home, and for your involvement in regards to civil engagement, because it's something that's crucial and important. And I think it's a testament to Ward 1 that we have four qualified people running for office. We're the only ones that are going to have a primary. And, this is the last primary for our city. City Council already voted to get rid of the primary system. So all eyes will be on Ward 1 and the decision you guys make in regards to leading our city forward. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a small business owner. I'm an attorney. I'm a nonprofit leader. I'm also on the Human Rights Commission. I'm a proud member of the Allies of St. Louis Park. And our city is at an inflection point. We have the opportunity to bend towards progress or towards, regression. And it's important because our city has always been a city that's been on the progressive edge out of all the first ring suburbs that there are out there. And I want to be able to continue that tradition, especially by providing a fresh perspective on the City Council. I'm not originally from here, but my partner and I, specifically chose St. Louis Park because of the inclusive environment you guys have here, and you guys have welcomed us with open arms, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to questions. Again, we're going to be doing this in an alternating format. This first question will be first answered by Mr. Kaplan, followed by Mr. Stout. The question is, what motivated you to run for City Council?
Sue Sanger sat around for 20 years and basically rubber stamped everything, in my opinion. Her legacy, well, perhaps that's sacrilege, but I mean, her what can she say? That her big thing was to provide bicycle spaces with new buildings that are being built? I got tired of it. And when she finally retired, it was Mr. Shekleton called me up because he was being proactive in running and asked me what was wrong with the city. And by the time I gave him 20 minutes of an earful, I figured, well, I better run too, because if there's only one person running, I'll never regret it. I'll always regret it. I'll never live it down if there's only one person running unopposed. I thought it would be me and Brian Shekleton. As it turns out, there's four people, which is an interesting thing, and you got a great thing to choose from. And I've lived in St. Louis Park for 19 years, 1 year short of Margaret, so I think I know the lay of the land just as Margaret does. I'm an ordinary guy living and working in St. Louis Park with wife and kids and home and white picket fence and trees and 2 cars and blah, blah, blah. And I've come in contact with City Hall from time to time, and I just think I know how the city could be tweaked, and I would do my best to help out, just as everybody else would.
Thank you. Mr. Stout, followed by Mr. Shekleton.
Thank you. I've been a proud active member of the Allies of St. Louis Park. That's where I got my involvement locally in regards to some of the activism that I've been doing. And, through those activities, I've spoken in front of the school board, I've spoken in front of City Council, I've attended many meetings and met many, different diverse leaders throughout the city. And I've even met with members of, city leadership here, being, the mayor, our city manager, our chief of police. And there's one reoccurring theme. They all want to increase diversity, but they don't know how to do it. They all recognize that there's an issue in regards to diversity, in regards to our leadership here in the city, and it's just not present. And they're actively trying to do things within their power to be able to do it. But, you know, the best way to do it is to be able to have diverse leaders and have those diverse leaders show other individuals that it is possible for them to be involved. It is possible for them to be here and be an active participant in the community. As a member of the Human Rights Commission, we just had a meeting a week or so ago in regards to the Yanez trial and the Philando Castile shooting. I was the only person of color there. I know I'm not the only person of color in this city. And it's important to be able to provide opportunities for folks to get involved. And my being involved in this race, hopefully, you know, winning the city council seat, would also provide the opportunity for others to be involved, whether it be on the city commissions or the city boards or even running for city council as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shekleton?
Well, I think I'm on this side of the table of those of us who recently chose to live in this community. I decided to move here in part because I have deep roots here. I used to do lunch weekly at the Lincoln Dell until that shut down, and waitress moved to the Byerly's, and that's where I had lunch with my grandparents. And I do think that this city is at a crux point, in part because light rail is finally going to be built, and when that comes, our housing pressures will multiply, our development pressures will multiply, and we have to figure out how to respond to that. I spent the last 10 years, as I said, working at the Minnetonka Creek Watershed District, and there's an old saying from W.C. Fields, that is essentially, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. We have dealt with really complicated policy issues by bringing people to the table and engaging and bringing in communities. One of the biggest things I've regretted is what happened at Meadowbrook, because we put in a boardwalk with partnering with the city of St. Louis Park, and the developers at Meadowbrook Collaborative saw that as, or the owners saw that as a selling point, and it was one of those pieces that was used to market the place. But it gets back to experience and trying to figure out how to bring people together around complicated issues, and those are some of the issues. Those are some of the things I thought about when I was thinking about running.
Thank you. Ms. Rogg?
Thank you. I'm not going to dodge that race issue, and I'm going to tell you when I heard that Zaylore was going to file, I paused. And in the end, I decided to file anyway. Not anyway, I decided to file because I do believe that as a woman and as a person with 25 years of deep experience in this community, I also have things to offer that are valuable and unique, not better, not worse. That was response to earlier. I want to say what motivated me originally to run for city council is knowledge that there are some really key issues coming up for our council that have to do with the future of our city and maintaining the things that we've come to love about St. Louis Park. And the issues as I see them are around housing affordability, which is an issue about which I have a fair amount of knowledge, about responsible development, which is an issue also around which I have rapidly increasing knowledge and deep commitment to, given my nonprofit work around building and sustaining healthy communities. And then the other issue about which I'm deeply concerned and committed to is race equity. It's something that I work with in my nonprofit development consulting work as well. And so certainly I'm not a person of color. I am a woman, and I do bring a deep commitment to equity issues, both professionally and here as a community person.
Thank you very much, candidates. Our next question, which will be answered first by Ms. Rogg, followed by Mr. Shekleton, is what is a key new proposal that you would make as a new council person? I'm happy to. What is a key new proposal that you would make as a new council person?
Sure. So there are many, but the one that comes to mind has to do with conversations I've had recently with many, many people door knocking. It has to do with tear downs and new home construction. A lot of people are either silently or not so silently concerned about the aesthetics of our neighborhoods and our entire community, our blocks and so on. And in conversation with Sue Sanger, whom I respect, I heard about her efforts over the past many years to try and implement or get council agreement on some design guidelines. Many cities, I've done some research on this, many cities, including Mac Groveland, which is not a city, it's a specific ward within St. Paul, has implemented its very own design guidelines that include things like the maximum number of windows you need to have on a particular side of a house so that the neighbor isn't looking at a wall. It has to do with the maximum house you can have on a lot, so 45% of a lot only can be covered with a house. It has to do with roof lines. Now I'm kind of merging multiple cities, but there are many things cities are doing because this is not unique to St. Louis Park, as we probably all know. So definitely one of the new things I'd put before the council would have to do with getting a handle on being proactive around what our neighborhoods are going to look like 5-10 years from now.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shekleton, followed by Mr. Stout.
Property values are going up. If you look around the neighborhoods, you'll see all kinds of for sale signs. People are talking about how much they can get for their houses, and that's terrific. And I support the free market in that regard. But there's a real affordability gap that's building. I bought my house, and I don't know that I could afford to do that right now. And we haven't changed much other than aesthetics. There's a tool that Hennepin County has begun exploring, and that is one of taking land and putting it into a land trust such that the structure itself could be sold and potentially purchased, so that what you do is you don't change the value of the house, you don't change the value of the property, you change the affordability of the house. And that actually allows for greater access to home ownership, kind of across the spectrum. It doesn't take properties necessarily off the tax roll, and it allows our neighborhoods to be a place that any of us could afford to buy into. And it's a tool that I think the city should explore. There are others out there that are being leveraged to kind of manage the naturally occurring affordable housing that we have in our community that I think will be in jeopardy once light rail gets put in.
Thank you. Mr. Stout?
I know we'll end up spending a lot of time talking about affordable housing since it's definitely an important issue. So I'm going to segue to a different issue, which is dealing with the aspect of small businesses. I drive up and down, Minnetonka and Lake and see vacancy signs in many of our small business locations. And the question is what are we doing in regards to filling those vacancies? As I door knock, I hear people saying, I wish there was a restaurant that I could walk to so I won't have to drive, right? And there's things and issues like that the city has this, walkability campaign, Connect the Park campaign. And there's things that can be done in regard to the small business avenue aspect that could assist in regards to that. So one of the proposals that I would put out would be for the city council to work with the local businesses in regards to either semi-annually or annually having a open house night where they're there and we advertise it to neighboring cities and locations and the small businesses so that other small businesses can have the opportunity to come and see what vacancies are available here in St. Louis Park. This type of initiatives has happened in other cities, and it's reaped great benefits in regards to reducing the number of vacant small business properties. And so that would be a unique and creative proposal in regards to filling some of those vacancies and providing those opportunities for small businesses to grow here in St. Louis Park.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kaplan? How much time do we have? You have a minute and a half.
Got a minute and a half, so I'm going to talk fast. I've got six proposals. I agree with Zaylore on small businesses. The city needs to stop making small businesses jump through hoops and make it a whole lot easier to get small businesses in here, because small businesses are what makes flavor to the city. And I could speak for 5 minutes on it, but I won't. Number five, like Jeff Jacobs says in the city Zaylore, the cities are better able to make some decisions than the state or the county or the government. I think the city should be able to make its own stand on drones. I think the city should be rewarding people for organic recycling, and I'd like to go into that a lot more, but I don't have enough time. I think the city should take a stand and make a mission statement on minimum wages right here and now, as well as bike lanes on the city streets. The number one and number two issues are building heights, as I spoke to before, about density housing. If you read the front page of the paper, Edina's dealing with this now, and as Edina's going, so are a lot of those problems affecting St. Louis Park, as far as setting a limit height in neighborhoods, as far as skyscrapers and tall buildings. And number one, I propose a tax on plastic bags and plastic bottled water. 2 cents on a penny on every plastic bag that goes out in St. Louis Park, and 2 cents on every 16-ounce bottle of bottled water, and a penny on every 8-ounce bottle of bottled water. You take that money and you apply it to speed humps, you apply it to radar signals, you apply it to community service people, and you're able to pay for all of that I'm proposing.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Our next question will be first answered by Mr. Shekleton, followed by Mr. Stout. The question is, please comment on the ongoing lawsuit brought by Minneapolis residents questioning the environmental impacts and process of the current alignment of the SWLRT. Sorry, Southwest Light Rail Transit.
Well, first off, for those in the audience who don't know, and those of you on TV that don't know, I work for Hennepin County Commissioner Peter McLaughlin, who has been an advocate for this, and I also serve on the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, which is a permitting authority on the project. And I am not a party to that lawsuit, and from a water quality perspective, the engineers at the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District have made it very clear that there are not issues associated with groundwater contamination, with stopping of the flow of water from Cedar Lake to Lake the Isles. And I understand that there are lots of passions associated with the potential route of this through Minneapolis. A public engagement process has worked its path forward, and the city of Minneapolis, the city of St. Louis Park, the city of Hopkins, the city of Minnetonka, the city of Eden Prairie, all agreed that this route was the preferred route. There are residents who have disagreed with that, and that is, we live in a society where people have the right to file suit against a unit of government if they believe that they've made an erroneous decision, and there are a bunch of residents that have done that.
Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Stout.
Sorry. Would it be possible to repeat the question? As an attorney, I always have to make sure that they get it right.
Happy to. Please comment on the ongoing lawsuit brought by Minneapolis residents questioning the environmental impacts and process of the current alignment of the Southwest Light Rail Transit Corridor.
It's always interesting when you get an attorney to comment on a lawsuit. Haven't read all the briefs. I'm not involved in the lawsuit myself. However, one bit of perspective that I can bring, which I think could be advantageous for St. Louis Park, is this is not a unique issue to the Twin Cities and to St. Louis Park. This exact same issue happened in Los Angeles, and they had been fighting and fighting in regards to expanding the light rail to the beach. Everybody complains about traffic, but had they moved forward in regard to this process 30 years ago when it was first brought up, it would have cost, minimal investment in regards to how much it's costing today. And part of that has been, lawsuit after lawsuit in regards to aspects of environmental, people being concerned in regards to the aspect of eminent domain, the not in my backyard aspect. It's really important that to understand that St. Louis Park, we're not in a bubble, right? We're part of a community, we're part of a broader community, and our transit system has to be connected. And in order to be able to alleviate some of the questions and concerns that people have in regards to traffic, light rail is part of the solution in regards to that. And there's difficulties in regards to making some of these decisions, but some of it is about looking forward in regards to progress in the future. Had we made these decisions 20, 30 years ago, the cost would be a lot less in regards to what it is now. And if we wait another 20, 30 years, it'll cost us even more.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to move on to Mr. Kaplan, followed by Ms. Rogg.
I don't blame those people for causing a loss, for bringing up a lawsuit. If I was in Minneapolis, I'm sure I would do the same thing. I'm not against mass transit, not at all. I'm against the insane cost of this. I think the cost is. I'm against the cost of this. I think the cost is cost prohibitive. It's hundreds of millions of dollars, and I am not exaggerating. I think the cost doesn't justify it, and on top of the cost, then you have the buildup of all the places that are going to be built up right along the line, and that's more congestion. And I don't think that more people in St. Louis Park is necessarily a good thing. We have 45,250 people in St. Louis Park. To me, that's enough. I want to see more park and less people. We don't need to bring in more people and have it turn out like uptown or downtown, because eventually it's too much strain on everything and you end up with a slum. I'm not for it. I love mass transit, and I love the high occupancy vehicle lane, and I understand that we should have done it and would have done it and could have done it, but the money spent I don't think justifies the means, and to build up along those lines I think is going to bring not necessarily bring St. Louis Park down, but I think to develop it and develop it and develop it for the sake of developing it is not necessarily such a wonderful thing.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Ms. Rogg?
Thank you. So it's a complicated question, and certainly comment on a lawsuit. Yeah, that's a complicated question too. I would say that I don't know like Zaylore, like everyone, I don't necessarily know all the ins and outs of the lawsuit to comment on it per se. I will tell you that although I support Southwest Light Rail, for sure, we need it. Everybody seems to agree. I have to agree that I don't think, hope I'm not being wrongly political here, I accept what the route that's been chosen by the majority. That's how it works. I don't think through the lakes is necessarily the best route, personally, but I accept it, that those in charge made that decision, and now we need to mitigate and move forward with the plan that we have, or risk not having the line at all. And I do think it's critical that we have that mass transit for our community. So I want to say, too, that I was proud to participate in a big way with Safety in the Park, which was another issue related to light rail and how it might have impacted our own community by rerouting freight trains through St. Louis Park in a huge way. Tom Miller and Jamie LaPrey were the big heads of that, but there were many people who participated, myself as well. So yeah, that's my take on it. I'm for light rail. I think once we have made a decision together as a community, we need to move forward and mitigate as best we can.
Thank you very much. We're on to our third question. It's going to be first answered by Mr. Stout, followed by Mr. Kaplan. Please comment on the issue of adding sidewalks in St. Louis Park communities.
You gave me an easy one. I've done a lot of door knocking. I've tabled in many locations, both here in St. Louis Park and other places where I know that they're St. Louis Park residents. And the consensus in regards to individuals that have families, those that are senior citizens, those that are members of our Orthodox Jewish community, is that the sidewalks need to be there. How can we have a Connect the Park initiative and have segments of our communities isolated and blocked off from the rest of our city? If you're concerned in regards to walking your dog, walking your children to school, you need to be able to have the sidewalks. I walk my dog with my partner Aura all the time, and we pretty much walked everywhere there is to walk in St. Louis Park, looking at our dream homes, which we'll be working on buying one shortly, so we're excited about that. But most of our walk is in the street. Most of our walk is in the street because there's no sidewalks. And, it feels weird to walk on somebody's, lawn in front of their home. It would be easy for us to have at least a sidewalk on each side. And it's something that's necessary, especially as it relates to a safety issue. At night, it can be an issue in regards to, seeing people. And the last thing that we want is a lawsuit because we didn't have the sidewalks where we need to have the sidewalks to be able to prevent an accident. So let's be proactive as opposed to reactive in regard to this issue.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kaplan, followed by Ms. Rogue.
I've lived here for 19 years, and I don't see sidewalks as an issue or a problem. I'm basically against it because I saw in the last few years sidewalks shoved down a neighborhood's throat, a neighborhood that was telling the city council they didn't want it and they didn't need it, and yet the city council shoved it down and went ahead and didn't listen to them and built it anyway regardless. Mr. Zaylore says that streets without sidewalks are blocked off. I disagree. I've been living here 19 years with sidewalks and in an area that has sidewalks and that does not have sidewalks. And there's no problem, there's no issue with it being blocked off. People walk in the street and it hasn't been a problem for 19 years. Same with the sidewalks that are there. The bigger issue with sidewalks that came up last month at Lenox was the snow shoveling of the sidewalks. And that I would speak to a detail on at another time or when I have more time in another question. But I'm perfectly happy with the way it is with the sidewalks now. And putting in more just for the sake of more, a perfect example is by Bethel Synagogue. They're putting in a sidewalk there, and I don't see any point to it. If you go over there and look at it, you will see just how silly it is.
Next candidate to answer, Ms. Rogg, followed by Mr. Shekleton.
Thank you. So similar in some ways to the Southwest Light Rail opportunity to speak we just had, our city agreed that we wanted to have sidewalks, and I think it was a good thing. There are a few people that I've run into who are not in favor of sidewalks, but the vast majority understand their value to the children in our community, to everyone in our community, really. And I've also seen great examples of strategic mitigation of the impacts of sidewalks. So, for example, winding around trees or new retaining walls in an effort to work with residents to make sure that the impact of the sidewalk is as positive as it can be. I have a lot to say on sidewalks. I think also we could look as a city down the road, depending on our resources, at even greater ways to be environmentally friendly with our pavement impact. There's pervious pavement that can be tried. There's also opportunities to do more native plantings to absorb stormwater, because when we do put down pavement, we do create more runoff. That's true. I would like to speak briefly to the issue of sidewalk shoveling. I am in favor, I only have 30 seconds, but through significant study and discussion with neighbors and looking at what it would cost our city, I am in favor of the city shoveling all the sidewalks we have here, because if we think that if we want to have a walkable city, then we ought to maintain all of our sidewalks and not rely on seniors and people with disabilities to shovel their own sidewalks or pay others to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Finally, Mr. Shekleton.
So I live on an intersection, and it's kind of at the peak of the hill. Like on the side where there's no sidewalk, it goes down pretty fast. On the other side, it's a less of an incline. And when I was a kid, and I was learning how to ride a bike, guess which side I liked to go down the most? It was not the side with the sidewalk. It was the side with the hill. And at the base of that hill, there's not a stop sign. Never has been. And it just would scare the bejesus out of my grandmother. And I can't fault her. And I've got to say, the traffic patterns from the 1970s and 80s are different from what they are now. And when you talk to people about sidewalks, it makes perfect sense, until they start thinking about what happens to that part of my lawn where I don't have a sidewalk. What happened in some of our neighborhoods where there's a big kerfuffle about how do we implement this, and the city responded in kind at different points to different people in different ways. That was a level of engagement I've been involved in engagement activities where it's an honest exchange, and I've seen our city do this with some of the bike plans that they've been doing. Looking at 28th west of Highway 100, where the city went out and kind of did a charrette over a weekend to allow people to see what the plans are and how they might affect our streets and their front yards, and that kind of engagement is what needs to happen. And so I support sidewalks, and I support the city honestly engaging with people to have a dialogue about what happens to their front yards.
Thank you, Mr. Shekleton. Our next question it will be answered first by Mr. Kaplan, followed by Ms. Rogg. What are your thoughts about expanding and enhancing the partnership between the city and the school district?
Well, I'm not sure what you really mean by that. It seems to me that I've got kids in, I've had kids in the St. Louis Park School District, and I still have a child in the middle school, and then who will go on to the St. Louis Park High School. I don't see an issue or a problem with the city and the school district. What I see is a problem with the manager changing all the time, with Rob Metz going to district manager and then going on to pursue something else, and maybe not a solid leadership role there. It seems like it's been in juxtaposition for a while. But I don't know. This kind of takes me aback because I don't see that the city. I understand that this is an international baccalaureate community, and that's wonderful. And I think the school system is pretty decent from what I've seen. I know there's problems in the high school because I've had 2 kids that just came out of the high school. I know that it's not a perfect system, but I don't focus on this, and I don't look at the high schools as a major issue, at the school system as a major issue right now.
Thank you. Ms. Rogg, followed by Mr. Shekleton.
So one of the opportunities that comes directly to mind is the opportunity for the city to support the construction of a teen center. The St. Louis Park High School teens have been planning and advocating for something called the Nest, which they'd like to see be built over by Central Community Center. And I'd like to see the city get on board to provide some seed funding and then some ongoing funding as well. Beyond that, there are additional sort of smaller partnership opportunities, I think, around, for example, Westwood Nature Center. I was surprised to learn recently in conversation with a program person there that when my kids, by the way, I didn't mention that I have 3 park grads, 2010, 2012, and 2014, and when they were in the elementary schools, they had many great adventures at Westwood Hills Nature Center. It was core part of their education, and I was sad to learn that that's really been cut back to be, I think, only in 3rd grade or some very small number of visits to the Nature Center. And when I heard that, I thought about the fact that the city owns the Nature Center, and certainly there might be, I understand that transportation is always usually the biggest cost, but I feel that that's a missed opportunity to connect our schools and our city around a resource that we own as a city and that our students could take better advantage of. Another example is actually around the race equity work that the district is doing so successfully. I think that although our city council and staff is doing that work as well, we could partner more closely, and we could benefit from what the schools have learned in their work. So let's see. Oh, I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shekleton, followed by Mr. Stout.
The idea of the Nest is a terrific one, and I look forward to that actually happening. I think one of the lessons of the depot in Hopkins is you need site control, and that building is owned by a nonprofit that partners with the school district and partners with the city and partners with Hennepin County, and that's a model to look at to do something similar here. Something I actually really would like to see happen is Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center have this thing called BrookLink. In Minneapolis, they have Step Up. And it's an internship program for high school kids where they're placed into units of government and private sector to get actual credit as well as experience in the real world. And I've had one, going back 15 years every time I've been able to. It's been a terrific opportunity for these kids to get real world experience, but also to build networks. I've got we have in our office right now, we have a 15-year-old who's lives in the Phillips neighborhood. Her parents immigrated from Somalia, and she's just amazing. And I think she's a sophomore, junior right now. Our intern from 3 years ago is in college. She's the first person in her family. Her parents were immigrants from Somalia. She was born in a refugee camp, and her life experience is just amazing. And this Step Up program gave her the opportunity to advance herself, and she grabbed the opportunity and ran with it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stout?
You know, the City Council as well as the school board are two very important organizations and entities that significantly impact the lives of our citizens here in St. Louis Park. And it's crucial that there is a good working relationship between the two. I've already been establishing my own relationships already with members of the school board, especially as it relates to the gender inclusion policy, which I've been advocating with Elise, who is the outgoing president of the Gender and Sexuality Alliance over at the high school. The issue there is, you know, there's currently not a policy in our school district as it relates to transgender and gender nonconforming students. Minneapolis has a policy on the books. St. Paul has a policy on the books. The SSTAC will be voting next week in regards to providing and passing a toolkit that school districts across the state who are interested in regards to implementing a gender inclusion policy will have the ability to use that as their template. You know, the issues and excuses that have been provided thus far have kind of fallen by the wayside, and now the question is, are we going to move forward in regards to passing this? You know, we presented the school board with a petition with, if my memory serves me correct, it was around 600 signatures. Our constituents want this, and we haven't heard much from City Council in regard to this particular issue. So that's an example of the leadership that I would provide in regards to providing those relationships with the school board in regards to passing issues that could protect our students, and that's what it's all about.
Thank you very much. We go on to our next question. Ms. Rogg will be our first one to answer it, followed by Mr. Shekleton. And the question is, as a candidate, what will you do to advance racial justice and racial equity?
Thank you. So Seattle has a race and justice initiative that I've been studying, looking for clues as to what we could transfer here to St. Louis Park. And there are many things that we could and should do. And in fact, I'm going to preempt myself and bring up a program in Minneapolis that I've admired. It's the One Minneapolis Fund, and that fund provides $25,000 maximum to nonprofit organizations to develop participation and leadership skills for boards and commissions, for neighborhood association leadership, for various leadership positions in the community so that people can build their experience and move up the ladder of leadership in their community. But within Seattle, there are a variety of ways that race and justice issues have been forwarded. Among them, one that intrigues me a lot is environmental justice. And Jim Vaughn and I had a good conversation about this recently as well. He's our natural resources person here in St. Louis Park. And I hadn't heard this before, so I thought it was pretty exciting to think that we could make it a reality. It has to do with looking at some of our lower income areas in St. Louis Park. Of course, we do have those. And looking at tree plantings and other ways in which we are not being equitable in our distribution of resources. We think we are, and we're not bad people for not realizing it, but when we are awakened to the fact that, for example, I think I won't name them, but in certain neighborhoods in St. Louis Park, trees are no longer planted because residents don't have, the experience or the skill set to care for them in a way that will keep them alive, and so the city has just stopped planting them there.
Ms. Rock,
Goodness.
Your time is out.
It goes so fast when you get involved.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shekleton.
I think there's a lot of goodwill in this community, especially as it relates to racial justice and racial equity. Those of you on TV and in the front of the room may not be able to tell that there's one person of color in this room, and I'm sitting next to him. I was born with 2 eyes and I was born with 2 ears and a mouth, and I know to use them proportionally. I'm a white guy, in case you haven't noticed. My mother is not a citizen. I was raised in a house where 3 languages were spoken. I'm trilingual. I was teased as a child for my mother having an accent and for sometimes having odors on my clothes because we didn't cook in the ways that a lot of Americans do. And all of that is not because I am white, and I am treated very differently from people of color in this country. And so I go back to the lesson I learned, Steve, in my career working for elected officials. It is much more important to listen to people than it is to tell people what to do. And so to that end, when I think of how to deal with racial justice and racial equity, I like trying to figure out how to change the demographics in this room to more closely reflect the demographics in this community. And I don't necessarily know how to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Shekleton. Our next candidate to answer is Mr. Stout, followed by Mr. Kaplan.
Well, I guess as the only person of color in this room, everybody's waiting really to see what it is I'm going to say about this. But strangely enough, that's always been my experience. I grew up in Orange County in Anaheim, California, about a mile away from Disneyland. Not a lot of African Americans there. If my memory serves me correct, there were about 3 African Americans in my elementary school. We maybe graduated to about 5 by the time I got to junior high school, and by the time I was in high school, I don't think there were any more. So I'm used to being in an environment where I'm the only one, and everybody's looking to me to be the spokesperson in regards to my community. I can definitely say that my life's experience is different than the other candidates that are running for this office. I've been racially profiled. I've have guns pulled out on me because I fit the profile of somebody that robbed a location. I've been the victim of a hate crime in high school. All you have to do is Google Zaylore Stout and you'll find it. Ventura High School, back in high school. So I think one of the issues in regards to racial justice and equity is having people that have the same life experience that I have at the table. And you do that by engaging, you do that by having individuals from the community, recruit individuals from those communities to be involved and more involved in whether it's city government, whether it's our boards and commissions. I mean, you look at our boards and commissions, I'm one of the, I'm on the Human Rights Commission, and it's not as diverse as it could be, and so I have the ability to go into the different communities and recruit individuals that are leaders within their community, bring them into the fold so that I don't have to be the only one in the room speaking on behalf of my race and my people, that we have many different people with many different perspectives and experiences, because I can't say that I have the exact same experience that African Americans here that grew up here have had. But there are similarities in regards to the experiences, and even me running in this race is hopefully providing opportunities for others to look and want to get involved.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kaplan?
In the big picture, I think this is a non-issue. I think everyone's trying to be so politically correct that it's just bound to come up. I don't mean to dismiss it because it's on everybody's mind. But like Brian said, there's goodwill in this community. And in my neighborhood, as well as I'm sure all of your neighborhoods, there's all kinds of signs about all are welcome here, basically love is the law, Black Lives Matter. Thank you, St. Louis Park Police. I think the citizens in St. Louis Park, in my heart of hearts, don't have a problem with the racial justice and racial equity. We don't have anything near what happened with Philando Castile or anything close to that. I would like to speak about what Margaret said, the bigger issue, which is when you say there are areas where there are trees no longer planted, this gets down to community involvement and people opening up their mouths and calling their city council members and saying, hey, who do I talk to about getting trees put in, or who's my council person getting some trees put in to make my area of St. Louis Park as good as everybody else's. This is personal responsibility, and that's what it's all about, folks. Personal responsibility, and I think most of the people in St. Louis Park have enough common sense to put 2 brain cells together, call up and get something done. You don't ask, you don't get. That's the reason any one of us are running, to get stuff done. So if people call and demand it, or ask nicely or demand it, then hopefully the council will respond to it.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Our next question will be first answered by Ms. Rogg, followed by Mr. Shekleton. And the question is, what is your position on ranked choice voting, and why do you hold that position?
I'm fine starting, but I think I started last time. Is that what's supposed to happen?
Sorry about that. Yeah, 1 and 5 are the same. Sorry. Why don't I skip to, number 2. We'll start with Mr. Shekleton, and then we'll follow by Mr. Stout.
the experience of Minneapolis and St. Paul demonstrates that we could do ranked choice voting here in St. Louis Park, and I would support that. Having said that, I'd like to just make it clear that when I've read the pieces in the Sun-Sailor that have indicated that you cannot elect somebody who does not achieve 50%. Betsy Hodges would disagree with that, as would the woman who I supported, whose campaign I worked on in 2009 on a park board race, who achieved 46% and got herself elected to the Minneapolis Park Board. I think how we vote is fundamental to who we are as citizens. And it should not be something that is voted on solely by the city council. I think there needs to be a broader community discussion about this. It was voted on by the residents of Minneapolis. It was voted on by the residents of St. Paul. It was voted on by the residents of Duluth. I think something of this significance should not be something that the city council just decides. And I don't think that the Charter Commission should do it either. I've talked with some city leaders, and it's like there's not clarity about how that process should happen because we are a charter city. But I do believe that there needs to be a broader conversation in this community about how we vote if we want to choose a different way of casting ballots and counting ballots.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stout, followed by Mr. Kaplan.
Yes, I absolutely support ranked choice voting. I've supported it here, and I supported it when I lived in California. The reason why, there's many factors, but the ones that I'd like to highlight today is that it increases voter turnout. So I know there are some League of Women Voter attendees that were fiercely advocating at the city council meeting that they consider ranked choice voting. And the reason why City Council voted to get rid of our primary system is because it was costing us $16,000 for a 3% voter turnout. $16,000. So it's gone. This is the last primary. And so what's going to happen after this? We want to have the ability to encourage people to get out and vote, and ranked choice voting it does exactly that. It gives people the opportunity to vote for who they want to vote for, regardless of whether they really honestly feel the person has the ability to be able to win or not. They get to vote their conscience, and then they get to vote their second choice, and their third choice, and their fourth choice. And sometimes, guess what? It's that second and third choice that decides the race. And so, it also encourages civil discourse. As you can see, we've been quite civil in regards to our discussions here, and we don't even have ranked choice voting yet. So think about how more civil it would be when folks are really trying to vie for your second and third choice vote. But I really encourage that. And yes, we need to have a discussion. We need the Charter Commission to look into all the details in regards to it. But from a policy and principle perspective, I support democracy and I support ranked choice voting.
Thank you, Mr. Stout. Now Mr. Kaplan, followed by Ms. Roque.
Just my luck that it's happening after this election. This should be a question that requires 10 seconds answers, not a minute and a half. This is a no-brainer. It saves time. It saves money. It's efficient. Everybody wants efficiency in government. It's more efficient. Like Mr. Stout says, 3% or 4% turnout. It just makes sense. This should be a yes or no question, just like the smoking issue. Everybody, like the smoking issue of raising it to 21, either yes or no. It's a no-brainer, and it doesn't require a big detailed answer. I'm all for it 100%, just as I am for the upping the age of smoking to 21.
Thank you very much. Ms. Roque.
So briefly, since I ran at the mouth around my response to the race equity question, I wanted to mention that two big things that I'm also really committed to as a candidate and would be as a council member is increasing home ownership for people of color and also increasing business ownership opportunities for people of color in our communities, two pathways to wealth, which is an important piece of breaking up generational poverty. So yes, I'm fully in support of ranked choice voting for all the reasons stated, I guess, by Zaylore and Steve and I so far. I think what's awesome about ranked choice voting is that more people come away at the end of the election feeling as if their votes counted, as opposed to just straight up winners and losers. And if you voted for the person who didn't win, your vote, didn't count, you might feel. And so with the opportunity for first and second choice votes and sometimes third choice votes to count, more people feel and truthfully that their votes did count. Also, it increases voter turnout, as Zaylore noted, and I also am pleased that ranked choice voting eliminates the power of special interests and insider politics. Sometimes with the way things are now, we can have people win with 25, 30% of the vote. That's far from a majority. And yet, if you get enough folks who are going to actually get to the polls and cast their vote, then they're going to win, even if they're the minority.
Thank you very much. We are now on to our final question. So after this, the candidates answer this question, we are going to move into our closing statements. So this question will first be answered by Mr. Stout, followed by Mr. Kaplan. The question is, how will you remain accountable to the voters if elected?
Well, you remain accountable to the voters by engaging in the voters and remaining in contact with the voters. Through my door knocking, some people have expressed concern in regard to their ability to be in contact with their elected officials, whether there was an adequate response time, whether they even took their concerns seriously. And so this parlays into the citywide snow removal issue that I posted a Facebook Live post on, and you can take a look at that on my website, where this was an issue that was brought to City Council's attention by a constituent who's a senior who lives on a corner, and he has a lot of sidewalk to take care of. And the issue is across the street, the determination was that was a community sidewalk, and so that means the city was going to remove the snow on that sidewalk. Yet his was a neighborhood sidewalk, and he was responsible for removing the snow on his, though his tax dollars were paying for his neighbor's snow to be removed on his sidewalk. So this is an equity issue for our seniors, because again, we're an aging population, whether we like it or not. And we also have, our Orthodox Jewish population who, based on their religious practices, can't remove the snow from the sidewalks on certain days. And so it's a safety issue, it's an equity issue all around. And so, it's crucial in regards to taking account and listening to the constituents. I have no problem holding basic office hours, where folks have the ability to come over and speak to me on a regular basis, and I'm available when they have questions and concerns or email me.
Thank you, Mr. Stout. Next, Mr. Kaplan, followed by Ms. Rogg.
Thank goodness you're in favor of holding basic office hours. I guess I had my doubts. This is how you remain accountable to voters, by being available, by having a phone number, like a cell phone or a home phone, that you pick up and answer in the flesh, like as a real person. You just make yourself available, and people know where to find you. They know where your address is, they know where to drop by, or they know where to call, or they know where to reach you at City Hall. And when they come to City Hall and leave a message for you, you respond within hopefully 24 hours or sooner. Or they reach you by email, or they reach you on Facebook, or they reach you any number of ways. It's a basic thing that we shouldn't even be discussing here, because every one of us, I assume, is planning on being accountable, and I don't see any problem with it. What you don't do is show up once a year at the neighborhood on the first Tuesday in August at the neighborhood national night out to press the flesh and show that you're still your council ward person and make a big showing of things, and then disappear for the other 364 days of the year. You make yourself available, you get out there, you act, blah, blah, blah. I could spend another 6 minutes on the whole sidewalk issue, and we don't have that here, but I would love to address that if we had more time. Being available is being available for real.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Ms. Rogg, followed by Mr. Shekleton.
Thank you. I love this question. I think this is where my history and experience really comes in. If you've worked with me over the last 25 years, you know that being accountable is something that I'm really good at and take seriously. Or if you've tried to reach out to me during this campaign, I think, I don't necessarily see anybody I didn't know before that's reached out, but I've gotten back right away. And I've had an hour-and-a-half meeting with a senior up the street who felt ignored and didn't think anybody wanted to listen to her, gosh, I learned a lot from her. I'm planning on meeting next week with members of the Jewish community. I know others are as well, with the Orthodox community, to hear their concerns. This is an area where I feel that I shine, and if you ask others, I think you'll find evidence of that. In terms of being accountable to decisions that I made, I mean, there's being available and there's being accountable. And I think being accountable means taking the job of city council member really seriously and looking at the issues and studying them as best you can. I know that oftentimes city council, most of the time, they actually look to staff for answers, and I think staff is awesome, and they provide great information to city council. But I think council members themselves can look outside of what staff provides to them and get even more information and bring that to the table in order to make the most informed decisions possible. And, you know, I just want to second how important it is to me to listen to constituents and have them feel respected. It's a core value of mine.
Thank you very much, candidates. We will now move into the two. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for catching that. Thank you very much. Jumping ahead of myself, so I deeply apologize. Mr. Shekleton, please answer the question. You have a minute and a half.
It's actually a pretty simple answer. Answer your phone, respond to emails, go to community meetings, go shopping here, talk to people, and, you know, talking to people, but listen to people, because oftentimes when people are calling city council members, it's because something's going wrong. I mean, I called Sue Singer when the municipal retaining wall in front of my on 27th starts pushing into the street. That's when I call Sue, and that's when it gets fixed by the city workers. You know, when there are more challenging issues, you let people yell at you. Like, that's the job, because when they're calling, they're frustrated and they want help, and you just have to be responsive and be accessible and be available.
Thank you very much. I guess now we can move on to closing statements. So thank you very much. Again, candidates, we're going to be doing the closing statements. You will have 2 minutes for them. We'll be doing them in reverse order of the opening statements. So Mr. Stout will be starting, followed by Mr. Shekleton. And Mr. Stout, you can start us off.
Again, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. My other candidates here for taking the initiative to put yourselves out there, which is a really brave thing to do. The attendees here, as well as all the questions, the great questions that have been submitted here in person as well as online. It's been my privilege to continue to live here in St. Louis Park with my partner, which has been an open and welcoming community to us both. Again, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a small business owner, I'm an attorney, which provides me with the flexibility to change up my schedule and be available when it's time to meet with constituents, as well as a nonprofit leader. We don't know what's going to happen over the next 4 years. You know, our city is likely going to be presented with new challenges that the city has never had to address and tackle before. And my goal and focus in regards to running for this position is to bring that different, unique, and diverse perspective to that discussion. I wasn't raised here. You know, I don't have 25 years of experience living here in St. Louis Park. I did not, you know, buy my grandparents' home, though I wish I had the ability to do that. But I have lived in other communities that are analogous to where St. Louis Park is now. I grew up in Orange County, which had the exact same demographic about 20, 30 years ago. And the demographics have changed significantly. And I've seen cities in Orange County that have moved towards progress and cities within Orange County that did not, and saw the ramifications in regard to the decisions that city council in those different cities have made. And I believe that I would be able to bring my experience of living other places to bring that fresh perspective to city council. You definitely don't want everybody to have the same life experience on city council. If you think about a board of directors, it's a very diverse group of people with different expertise that they bring together and tackle problems and issues together. And I would bring that different perspective to that discussion. And so I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Shekleton, followed by Ms. Rock.
We have we all have great choices here. I mean, since 4 of us will be voting, you all have great choices as well. The life experiences at this table are very diverse. The way we approach our policies is not. And I think it really comes down to what do we want out of this community, and how, like, what do we want on this council? Local government is the place to be, because it is not a partisan fights don't happen here. This really is about nuts and bolts of how you get things done, how you get responsive government. I think I have the skills, the knowledge, and the experience to be a really effective council member, in part because we have really challenging issues that are coming towards, that are ahead of us. And I look forward to serving as your council member.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rock?
Thank you. Thank you to the League for hosting tonight's forum. Turned out to be pretty fun, even though I was super nervous. Thanks to my fellow candidates for, I agree, being willing to have the courage and the time and the energy to step up and run. And thank you everyone tonight for coming out and listening. We all do bring something different to this potential city council role. I believe we need more women in leadership and politics, and that is a big part of why I decided to run. Another part of the reason I decided to run is that I feel I have a vast wealth of knowledge about this community that is yet untapped in terms of some of the partnerships that we could develop to strengthen what we offer to everyone in this community. As far as some research around best practices in community building and economic empowerment of under-resourced people. There are a lot of things that I have in my mind and experience that I'd like to bring to the table to discuss with our council. And I feel I have the confidence, as someone who's been around for a while but not in a leadership role, as an observer role, to be able to really contribute. Let's see. So we have an election that is, in my view, ending on August 8th, because you can vote any time between now and August 7th at City Council between 8 and 4:30. I'm not saying everyone should run out and vote for me tomorrow. I mean, vote for who you want to. Definitely make an informed choice about who at this table you think will be your preferred candidate. But when you are ready to do so, I want to tell you that as of today, only 16 people have voted in this community, although the polls have been open since June 23rd. So don't forget, and don't risk forgetting on August 8th. Please do know that you can go up and vote at City Hall 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday between now and August 7th, and then August 8th at your polling location. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our final candidate, Mr. Kaplan.
Thanks for coming here. I know none of you are going to forget, because otherwise you wouldn't be here right now. That's not an issue at all. As Zaylore says, we have new challenges. Building heights, we have light rail, we've got a minimum wage stance, we've got smoking stance, we've got all of that. And if you want somebody with common sense, that's all I'm presenting. If you want another woman on the council, like my neighbor said, well, I'm voting for the woman to replace woman, then 3 of us here are immediately out. If you want diversity and a person of color on the board, then 3 of us are immediately out. That's just the simple plain fact of it. All I can offer is common sense, and having lived here, having walked the walk, talked the talk, just like Margaret, having been a resident here for almost 2 decades, caring enough to sit here and tell you, just like everybody else, that we'll be available, we'll use common sense, we'll make the best decisions for all the people, and try and move the city forward. But that's just political speak. Try and make common sense to keep the city livable, and not let the city go downhill, and not let the city make major financial decisions or major, bad decisions in general. That's all.
Thank you very much, candidates. So thank you, candidates. Thank you to this full house here in St. Louis Park. It's wonderful to see this kind of civic involvement. And thank you for our cable audience for watching on television. I'm going to remind you, and I'll turn it over to Deb Brinkman to remind you that this will be repeated. And thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Just a couple more thank yous and a couple more reminders. The primary election is Tuesday, August 8th, and the general election is Tuesday, November 7th. Polling places are listed on the St. Louis Park website. Thanks again to other members of the league. Special thanks to Reg and to the City of St. Louis Park for assisting with this forum, and special thanks to Jillian. Great job. As Margaret mentioned, absentee ballots are available right now. So make sure that you take the opportunity to go ahead and vote. If you need to order a ballot, please contact the city clerk administrator by calling 952-924-2503. Absentee voting opened June 23rd, and the ballot must be received by the city no later than the day before the primary on August 7th. Thanks again, and have a great evening.